Question. Hi Kim. In relation to your answer to my question, if one can be self-aware to a fault, there's another answer, it's called, can you be self-aware to a fault? I understand what you mean by your answer, of how we only know our reactions, anger, anxiety, envy, etc., but not exactly the self behind it. But what if I can name the self that is behind the reaction, but still I'm unable to transcend that self? Well, I actually gave another answer. I talk about resolving a subconscious self by seeing beyond the reaction part of the self. There's like a layer of a self that's reacting. And that you can name often. You can see that as reaction, but at a deeper level, there is a self that caused you to feel you have to react to something on earth. And that's beyond just naming the self. Anyway, so the question goes on. For example, I have a self that is highly anxious. Anxiety has been a source of difficulty in my life. Now I understand that my anxious reactions are due to my inability to trust the process of life. My inability to see that I'm not powerless or limitless or incapable of handling life in an unascended sphere. Now I already know I am the presence. I know I'm more. That my presence, no matter what happens to me, be it sickness or poverty or even death, I really do not need to be afraid of them all, because my presence will be untouched. I know now, too, that this earth is a simulator. Therefore, anything that I experience here, be it sickness, war, suffering, etc., is all but an unreality, a simulator experience to help me grow. I will be kept intact to move on to my next embodiment or ascension. I know all of these. I believe them even. I mean, I do not find them at all to be mumbo-jumbo. But how come I still experience a lot of anxiety when I'm faced with life situations? I can name many selves, an insecure self who wants validation. I know this is a self because I am a beautiful I am presence and not my egoic selves. So I truly do not need to be validated by this external world, and yet I still want it. Validation from the world. So how come I know, but still I'm unable to shift? Well, as I said, I gave another answer where I talk about something very, very similar here. And I also have my whole series about the avatar psychology. And I recommend you watch that as well, if you want to deal with something like this. But what I would say is that the concept of the separate selves, it started with this idea that some of us came to Earth as avatars. We came from a natural planet where we don't have all the murder and mayhem that we have on Earth. So basically on a natural planet, in relation to anxiety, we didn't have anxiety. There was no need to be anxious, because we knew, we didn't even have the idea that we could be exposed to warfare or be killed or tortured or whatever. It wasn't even on our radar screen, so to speak. And so we come to Earth, we're exposed to some of the things that are going on this planet, very aggressive attack, and we receive this cosmic burst trauma. We create what's called the primal self and a whole lot of other selves in reaction to Earth. Right? So we can have certain selves that are in reaction to Earth, and they can make us very anxious just because of the things that are going on here. And so it's very possible that these anxious selves are relating to this burst trauma. And I have a book called Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, given by the Ascended Masters, so to give a lot of teachings, but also some practical tools for resolving these selves. So I recommended you use that to deal with the anxiety self. But there can be another component of it, and that is, as I've said several times before, you had an intention for coming to Earth. Before you came, before you decided to come from a natural planet to Earth, you had a positive view of what you could do here, how you could make a positive difference. Then you come here, you experience this burst trauma and as a result of that, you feel rejected, you might feel ignored, you feel rejected and attacked by the fallen beings, you feel ignored by the Earth's inhabitants, and you might very well, usually that happens, you start doubting that you could fulfill the reason that made you decide to come here. The positive vision of what you could do here, you doubted you can fulfill it. This can also give rise to anxiety, because all of a sudden it's like, I recognized that in myself when I realized this. It was like, was it pointless to come here? Did I make a mistake by coming here? I mean, if I couldn't do what I thought I could do before I came here, it's a total failure to come here, right? Why would I suffer all this if I can't do anything good anyway? And this can also give you this desire for validation, because I could see it myself. If enough people recognized what I'm saying and what I'm teaching and bought the books and this and that, it would have been worthwhile anyway. So it was like, I had come to Earth, it wasn't what I expected, I'd been disappointed, I had suffered a lot, but if I was at least validated that I had made a difference, that I had done something worthwhile, it would have been okay, it would have been worth it after all. But that's a self that's a deeper level than the birth trauma and the primal self, because this is a self we had with us from a natural planet to when we came to Earth. So I realized that beyond the birth trauma, there were deeper selves to resolve. The birth trauma and all the selves that followed after that were selves I created in reaction to actual conditions on Earth. Actual conditions. But there were other selves that I brought with me that were created not in reaction to actual conditions, but my vision of the conditions on Earth. And that vision wasn't the highest possible. I had to realize. I had to grapple with that, because I had to accept I was not an ascended master when I decided to come to Earth. I had reached a high level of awareness on a natural planet, but I was not ascended. So I didn't have the Christ vision. I looked at Earth a certain way, and for example, for me, I looked at Earth and said, oh, suffering shouldn't be happening. People shouldn't be suffering. But I didn't fully realize that people are suffering as a result of choices they have made. And you can't go in and say suffering is wrong. You can't even say that the choices people made were wrong, because they made your choices for a reason and to get a certain experience. So you have to take a step back from this. Instead of having your goal to end suffering, you have to step back and see a deeper level of helping people raise their awareness so they don't make the choices anymore that lead to suffering. But that's a whole different approach, a much deeper approach. So I think that the feeling rejected and a desire for validation relates to these deeper selves that are before the birth trauma. Now you can still use the teachings and tools in healing your spiritual traumas to deal with these selves and come to see it. Come to see the deeper self. You can ask the Ascended Masters for help. I often ask Mother Mary and Jesus because they're close to me, or I feel close to them. So whatever Master you feel close to, ask them to help you see. I would say again, first work on the birth trauma, and then start looking at these deeper selves that brought you to Earth. First your reaction to Earth, and then your decision to come to Earth. And then realize that it was based on a partial, incomplete, somewhat distorted vision. It was understandable. I'm not trying to, I realized there's no reason to blame myself for it. I made a decision based on how I saw Earth, and part of my reason for doing this, not consciously, but it was actually to resolve the enigma of free will, where you simply have to allow free will to outplay itself, as it does on Earth, and make peace with that. So there's a lot more to this that I've talked about in other videos, and but it really is, you know, you can see if you look at what the person is describing. I can name many selves. An insecure self who wants validation, but then earlier also an anxious self. And so you can see how they're tied together. You know, you want validation, but you're not sure you'll get it. In fact, you have experienced in past lifetimes that you won't get it, and that creates anxiety. But Why the anxiety? Because you want validation. And I talked about in this previous answer I'm referring to, I talked about how we, as avatars, we get ourselves into situations where we think we should be able to do something, but when we take a close look, we realize what we think we should be able to do is actually impossible, can't be done. So, you have a self that wants validation in a certain way, but because this is an unnatural planet and most people are trapped in duality, because they are fallen beings here, you won't get validation. But if you think you should get it, then you are anxious, have a self that's anxious because you're not getting it. So the way to cut the Gordian knot there is to step back and look at, is it actually realistic to expect that I can get validation on an unnatural planet like Earth? And when you see that it isn't, and when you give up the desire to do something, then you can overcome the whole ball of wax on the anxiety and needing validation and needing to feel it was worthwhile and all this stuff. And then you can be at peace with being here and realize that by just being here, you are making a positive difference. Even if you don't do anything that has a physical consequence. You can literally come to the point where, and it took me years, but you can come to a point where you're at peace with everything that's happened to you on Earth and everything that hasn't happened. Where you don't need the validation, you don't need the recognition, you don't even need to feel you've made a difference. Because you have made a difference to yourself in the sense that you have transcended the state of consciousness you had on a natural planet. You've grown, your I Am Presence has grown. But you've also made a difference in the sense that you have been part of the collective consciousness and you have pulled up on the collective consciousness. You can never see it, you can never look at a specific thing and say, oh, I did that. But you can know that you have made a positive difference. You can come to a point where that's enough for you, you're at peace with that. And that's when you can let go of the need for validation and the anxiety that comes from not getting it.